Recently, Epic Games has been reworking Save the World and actively testing new things behind the scenes. Now that the mode has been officially announced to go free to play next month, it's an exciting time to be a fan for a game mode that has been left unfinished. But with such a long history, including a 6-year development period before launch, it also means that the game has built up a lot of cut content throughout the years. As part of my Fortnite Cut content series, we're going to take a look at Save the World, Fortnite's original core mode, and explore the cut content and unused ideas that were once planned for the game throughout its development. This video will probably pique your interest just like it did with me while researching all this information, including things that haven't really been talked before. So grab some popcorn, sit back, relax, and enjoy. According to a source, Fortnite started out under the name Holdouts, a version of the game that existed well before the Unreal Engine 3 building game demo. It used assets from Gears of War 3 since the project originally came out of an internal jam at Epic Games in 2011. A developer from this era claimed that they never named the game Holdouts, so it's unknown what it actually originally went by, but the source who gave out the builds said that this was one of the names used. The project later evolved into the base building demo, which internally went by the name Project Fortress or simply Fortress. Now the next piece of information is a little bit harder to place since details about both Holdouts and Fortress are pretty scarce. But this is the first ever known image of Fortress. We can see that it appears to have an early version of the Taker and a massive shadow looming behind the building. Now interestingly, this massive shadow looming behind the building resembles a creature from the film The Mist, which is based on the 1990 novel by Stephen King. Elements in that story could have easily inspired elements from Save the World's storm and monster design, and perhaps an early version of this game. We don't have much information about Holdouts, but what we do have is a lot of information about Fortress, beginning with the game's icon, which features two monsters that are known as ghosts and a farm in the background. These two ghosts are human labmans from Gears of War 3, and the difference is that they were retextured for the game's icon. The game stars a character known as FN Guy, or as the community calls him, John Fortress. His character had a different design at this time, but he was featured all throughout Fortnite's development. He also had some voice lines.
Turn on the generator!
Oh no!
Here they come!
You spawn in a map with a generator and a sign that says "Welcome to Limbo," which I will explain what this is soon. The generator asset will later be reused for the Survive the Storm mission. Definitely one of the highlights of this game is the nighttime, as it felt like a horror game, and something that further solidifies this is that when it was nighttime, a red text appears letting the player know that husks are coming to invade your fort, and that you will need to protect your base. Once you have survived the night in your base, the game will tell you that you have survived the night and the cycle goes on. Character customization was planned, such as backpacks, hats, and even outfits. Charms were also present in this version, such as a teddy bear that would have been equipped for the backpack. I also want to point out that there were also charms present in the Battle Royale files, but I don't know if those came from this version of the game. Epic also planned to add some sort of ATK dune buggy vehicle to the game as seen in this concept art, but they ended up sticking with a Segway. Not much is known about this vehicle though. Earlier, I mentioned the generator and a sign that says "Welcome to Limbo." While this was actually a script I mentioned, that internal design documents describe it as follows. Periodically, non-player buildings in this world will be enveloped in a mist creature storm. When this happens, all players in the building are killed, and when the storm finally passes, the building will be replaced by a brand new building, thus keeping a steady stream of new loot opportunities introduced into the map. However, if players place their power generator inside the building before it's consumed by the storm, then all players inside the building instead get transported to Limbo, the mist creature's homeworld. Because it's nighttime when this happens, Limbo is mostly empty of monster creatures, so the players can explore and mine unique resources from Limbo. There's a giant obelisk at the center of Limbo, which is the gateway between their world and our world. The player's ultimate goal in the game is to destroy or plug up the obelisk. Players are eventually pulled out of Limbo and kicked back into the real world. If they happen to be inside another sucked into Limbo human building, then they ride that building back into the real world and end up in a completely different map in the human world. In this way, Limbo serves as a sort of hub, allowing players to transfer between different human world maps. Limbo's home to mist creatures. Players could enter under certain conditions. Rare mineable resources are found everywhere, and a giant center obelisk fuels the gate to Earth. Closing the gate is the endgame. Strongholds are present, and they are described as, these great structures were once called strongholds. Strongholds were a massive mist monster fortresses that represented one of the major challenges for the player to work towards conquering. Players who managed to retake all three strongholds in the game world would beat the game. Other maps that can be found in this version are a farm map, a lake map, which could be very well a second version of the main map, Test City _P is actually still used to this day as the reflection materials in Fortnite. Hansi _Test Map has these eerie looking takers which I'll dive into just a second. Tonks doesn't have much other than something that looks like an atlas, a castle map, the Fortnite logo map that predates the original trailer logo, and a couple more test maps that we don't have much information on with some screenshots of what the environment looked like. As I mentioned before, Epic made the Taker a really scary entity who would be able to jump scare you. Now, it is assumed to be part of a soul suck mechanic that would suck the soul out of your character, leaving you dead on the ground and unable to be revived. Oh, and if Epic didn't try to scare you enough already, listen to how he sounds.
I'm coming for you. You are
According to internal documents, the Taker is a mysterious enemy that is tied to a mystery that we will never know. They also retreat from light and have different manifestations. Trolls, also known as thieves in this version of the game, would also show up in your base and attempt to steal from you. There are actually some voice lines that talk about stealing and mocking the player. These, however, were later removed sometime later in other versions, but here's a small snippet of how the thief sounded like.
Mine. Ooh, stolen. Steal. Steal. Got it. You suck. I took it all from you, and now I'm running away. And you're going to cry all night. You'll never catch me. I'm going to take your stuff.
Epic also planned out biome pitches such as Transylvania, Egypt, and a snow biome. I assume the Egypt biome was later reworked years later into Canny Valley, and Transylvania into Hexylvania. Out of all of these three biomes, Transylvania has much more details, such as a vampire enemy that can drain blood by blood sucking which the player can escape from. The vampire can also get killed at sunrise. There was also a boss version that only spawns in Dracula's castle, and if you try to fight it until it has 10% of its health left, he turns into a swarm of bats and tries to escape and will reappear after regeneration, but if the player shoots the bats before he disappears, then the vampire is killed. Other enemies were planned, such as a werewolf that would wander around trying to find a player to attack and could sniff, howl, jump, attack with a blood frenzy ability. The next enemy was called Ghostly Lady, and not much is known about this one other than it has some sort of dash attack going as fast as 3 tiles per second. We could probably assume that this is the lady seen in the game's icon. Here's some of the characters they made for this game as part of character customization, as well as some early iterations of characters. I honestly love how they give off Gears vibes. Fortress is planned to release in Q1 2012 on Steam out of all platforms, as the first Unreal 3 engine game. Plans for Adobe Flash, PlayStation 3 in Q2 2012, and Xbox were also in the works. No builds of this game have surfaced yet, and it remains lost media. Fortress will later be renamed to Fortnite and was ready to be revealed as such, but Epic's legal department discovered that the trademark wasn't available, so the spelling was later changed to what we know it as today. At San Diego Comic-Con 2012, Epic Games held a panel where they discussed the game and announced that Fortnite would now be ported to Unreal 4. The game would now be only released on PC. According to articles from the event, a playable prototype running on Unreal Engine 3 was shown, demonstrating multiple ways the player can upgrade their weapons. One example included a crossbow that could be equipped with explosive bolts or electric shocks. Only a few screenshots from the panel remain, along with images of the merchandise that was handed out, and a very short clip from what may have been a now lost cinematic. Unfortunately, unlike other panels in 2012, this one is currently considered lost media. The next era is where things slowly transition from the original version into modern day Save the World. Around this time, Epic hosted closed tests for the game at certain conferences or private hosted events called Storm Chasers. Players would be given a physical golden ticket at conventions to attend the test for a few hours and try the game out. There is only one video out there of the game, and in it we can see that the shield bar is not present and only the stamina bar. Hero abilities weren't added until towards the end of 2013, and the in-game HUD changed multiple multiple times over a few month period. There is also this 43-second gameplay which the player was originally supposed to plug up a machine into a power generator, but instead of achieving that, they ended up plugging a transformer asset decoration instead. Here's how the 2014 version of the portal for the Taker looks like, along with two new husk types that appear in the Defending the Fort video. One of them is the tiny head husk, which usually appears in crowds, and as the name suggests, it has a very small head, making headshots harder to land, but also has 3 times the health of a regular husk, to prevent players from eliminating it too easily. The other is the Husk Ninja, which also spawns in crowds. This husk is the fastest type, but also one of the weakest since it doesn't have a special ability. It could sprint toward your objective, climb walls to reach it, and it could even dodge player attacks. Sounds of the husk were found in Online Test 6.5, and I'll play them right now. And that's everything we currently know about the pre-alpha. Before moving on into the game's alpha stage, there's another interesting project that I want to talk about that was worked alongside Fortnite, a mobile port called Fortnite Explorers. This was a spin-off developed by Epic Games in 2014. The game featured tile-based combat, a large open-world map filled with missions, a wide roster of heroes and monsters to collect, and even its own home-based style system. Very little is known about the project beyond a few screenshots, and at some point, it was eventually scrapped and reworked into a fantasy JRPG called Endless World. That version would be scrapped and later evolve into Battle Breakers, which was released in 2019. Next up is Alpha, or as I like to call it, the online test era. This era is very rich in content, and in order to participate in one of the 11 online tests, you had to receive an invitation or redeem a code given by Epic employees. Players who partook in these tests will receive exclusive banners, which are pretty rare to see in game nowadays. Out of the 11 online tests ever released, only 3 have surfaced due to the fact that many of the players who tested didn't save the files of the versions due to an NDA at the time preventing them from doing so. The only content that we have from these tests are patch notes, some images, videos, and audios of what these tests contained. Beginning with Online Test 1, which only has 3 known images and 1 video. In this image, we can see the early Jonesy design and a mission called Close the Gates. The UI changed drastically, and now the player has a backpack UI, which could mean that the backpack customization feature wasn't fully scrapped yet. Llamas weren't added to the game yet, but instead car packs that function the same as the loot llamas. There is also this video of a husk gym used for UX testing. In Online Test 2, not much had changed, and Close the Gate continues to be in the game, but we also have our first look into the world selection screen, the lobby, and the hero selection screens. Online Test 3 still has Close the Gate, which continues to be the only game we played around this time that we know of. Jonesy looks a lot different, and I'm pretty sure Ramirez was introduced in this test since there's a render of both, and a little fun fact about both of them is that their looks might be inspired by the movie Aliens. I just wanted to throw that out there. For Online Test 4, we have this short video showcasing one of the many variants of Ramirez that were made, and the backpack and materials UI that now includes Blue Glow. Other than that, we have notes that mention the addition of Launch the Rocket, Retrieve the Data, encampments, new settings, new hero models, stats, and home base and gadgets. Online Test 5 is where things get a little more spicy. The loading screen for Online Test 5 looked differently, though this might actually belong to the source code editor for the game. In this online test, Epic began experimenting with its first PvP mode called Weather the Storm, which was first playable in Online Test 5 and 5.5. The mode centers around 2 teams, Dinosaur and Unicorn, with the goal being to destroy the enemy's team base first. In the middle of the map, there's a big tower where you're meant to deposit Blue Glow, which you could obtain by doing side missions around the map while you're fighting. Once enough had been deposited, this would spawn Husk on the enemy side's base, which would aid your team in destroying their core. The mode also featured unique abilities and perks. One example was Gravity Sphere, which created a blue bubble that froze Husk and generated an anti-gravity field. Another was Keen Eyes, allowing players to see valuable objects through walls. For Online Test 6, this is how buildings would have looked like in this test. Buildings were a feature that allowed you to gain gadgets and certain buffs. If you slotted survivors or heroes into them, you could gain additional buffs and gain multiplier to buffs already gained from the building itself. Weather the Storm was still present in Online Test 6, but it wasn't actually playable. This is because Epic stopped allowing players to access the mode publicly after Online Test 5.5. However, there's still several things from this mode that end up going unused. First is the radar. which works similarly to a UAV from the Call of Duty series. It would sweep the map and reveal enemy player positions until it was destroyed. Next is the laser wall, which was used to keep enemies and husks away from your base. It only damaged enemies and it would temporarily shut off whenever you or one of your teammates walked through it. Then there's Jupiter Generator, which would launch enemies into the air, causing them to fall to their death. Another unused feature is the Big Bomb Station, which lets your team equip the Big Bomb, an item that instantly eliminates anyone within its explosion range. There's also something called Resource Siphon. It's part of a different strategic building actor, and my guess that it says that because the object isn't accessible on its own. So if someone were to manage to access it, WTF will probably be a fair reaction. Resource Station, not to be confused with the siphon that I just mentioned, was designed to slowly generate resources that players could collect over time. These included ammo, crafting materials, placeable PvP structures, and standard building resources. And finally, there's Boba Tower, another strategic building actor used in the PvP mode. It fired pumpkins that dealt damage, and for some reason, it also made a very strange noise. There are also some sound effects in the files for it.
Die! Pumpkin! Get some! Hate you! Eat it!
Throughout the online tests, Epic was trying to implement skill trees for your heroes, so in this test they added a new skill tree called Ability Tree that focuses more on your hero's ability, buffs, and more perks that came with your hero that you picked. Online Test 6.5 is one of the only online tests that anyone can try to play, but sadly we can't access the home base or any of the menus, and this is because the build launches us straight into the map. This is due to the fact that the game has to be modified just to run, since it originally required a login and server response, but if you really wanted to, I'm sure you're able to get them to work somehow. In this test, a new mission called Deliver the Goods appears. It functions almost exactly like Deliver the Bomb, but instead of transporting a bomb, you deliver a tub filled with items. Another fun fact about this tub is that it originally used Microsoft Narrator in real time for the voice lines, before Ray's voice actor recorded the dialogue.
Hey, caution! Cuidado! Fort's in danger! Let's go!
Cover tub health is below 75%. Make sure to stay with the tub. Cover tub health is below 50%. That tub is not going to defend itself.
Now let's dive into what I found in this build. There are 14 maps that I can access in total. 5 of them are either early versions of maps or maps that exist in Save the World today. Another 4 belong to a section called Outpost, which appears to be part of an early version of the Storm Shield home base. Each of these 4 maps contain a Storm Shield core model that looks different from the one in the final game, along with 5 amplifiers per map. But unfortunately, the functionality for crafting it and the existing placeholder amplifiers don't work. And if I tried to destroy the Storm Shield core using the God Gun, the game simply crashes, most likely because doing that would normally trigger the end of the mission screen. There's also something called the Ward, which has about 7 different variants. As far as I know, none of them actually function because the system was still extremely early in development during Alpha. It was supposed to act as an area of denial system, preventing certain enemies or even props from entering specific areas. In this build, it's restricted to outposts. The next map is called Keep Prototype Map. This map was part of a mode called Keep, which would later be reworked and renamed into Operation Block Party, which would later be renamed into Horde Bash, which would later be remade and renamed once again to challenge the Horde. The prototype map seems to have been reused for the Forest mission since they have a lot of similar features. AI Testbed 2 is one of the many testbeds that Epic used to test many Unreal Engine 4 and Fortnite features and was featured in many official Unreal Engine documents and videos. This is the map CypherPK played on his very misleading video for this game, but regardless, this map is amazing and I really wish it was in the game still. PvP Tower is none other than Weather the Storm, which was seen previously in the other 2 online tests. Though the version I'm playing is broken due to the missing UI elements and of course the many features it had. Breaking any of the core base animals doesn't crash the game, but at least you can check out the map that was used for this mode. And I left this next one for last because it's very interesting. Epic once had its own version of Fortnite Creative called the Manor. It is rumored to be a paid mode that would let players build and customize their own manor using different decorations and then invite other players to explore or hang out. Not much is known about this home base location since it was never fully finished, but there's still some details that gives us an idea of how it would have worked. Players had access to around 10 decorations that they could place around their builds, ranging from things from armor stands to potted plants. Most of these were purely cosmetic, but there was also a storage system that was never fully implemented, which would have allowed players to store a few items inside certain decorations for later use. The manor itself could be upgraded through 5 tiers, with each tier increasing how much the player could build within their manor. It's also believed that 5 different manor maps may have been in development. However, the forest map is the only one we know that was actually worked fully, with the other map being a prototype for this mode. Within the Battle Royale files, there were these glow torches that had no functionality in game. Well, as it turns out, this is actually intended for Fortnite and would have been used to light up your home base. These can be spotted as props in the onboarding mission. For traps, we have a cart track that was used for the Deliver the Goods mission, a sentry gunner which shoots on line of sight, a stamina station that would give you stamina similar to the health pads that we currently have in game, the ward that I mentioned before which suppresses Husk Patrol portals from spawning nearby and they only prevent portals, and a rail trap turret which uses the wall dynamo as a placeholder. For some reason it doesn't work for me, but it's supposed to launch a projectile at incoming enemies at somewhat of a quick rate. And lastly, the floor trap wires, which were part of the 2013 wiring concept footage that I showed earlier, but in this test they have no function. We have some very unique consumables that are not seen in games, such as potions. These potions were craftable and each potion enhances your abilities, and they are as follows. Brain Juice, a search of inspiration that gives you an idea that reduces building material cost by 50% for 9 seconds. Unfortunately, you get to forget your great idea and go back to your old inefficient methods when it wears off. Mushroom Smoothie, everybody's favorite mushroom snack, increases your maximum health by 30% for 4 minutes and it heals you for the same amount. Power Juice, grants a 25% chance to deal critical damage with melee attacks for 90 seconds. Zoom Juice, makes you move absurdly fast and jump ridiculously high for 6 seconds. The dizzying effect leaves you completely ineffective with weapons and 50% more susceptible to damage for the duration. Mushroom Brew, restores 2.5% of your maximum health and energy every second for 60 seconds. Fizz, restores 10% of max energy every second for 20 seconds. Mending Potion, regenerate 2.5% health every 3 seconds for 4 minutes. Food items are also present and these were obtained by looting, such as apples, bacon, berries, mega bacon, pumpkin, fish taco, and a bucket of fried chicken. And lastly, for consumables, you have healing items. There were only 3 types of healing items. These were medkit bandages, a bomb, and a healing pad that used mega bacon. As for heroes, it is kinda all over the place as it features early renditions of characters such as Jonesy and the Defaults, Dennis, these weird testing shirtless dudes, ninja heroes, and other characters. There are also character cosmetic types left in the files such as head, texture, color, trinket, face, gadget, body, and class flare. There was also a max amount of cosmetics that you could wear, but unfortunately all of this would be scrapped. Backpacks are still present in the game's files, including the teddy bear charm that for some reason appears under this character model. There are so many backpacks in the files, which some of them even had references to other games, and some of the basic ones ended up becoming props in the final release of the game. We also have a couple of scrapped enemies that are pretty amazing, starting with the werewolf, which I mentioned was planned for the Transylvania biome in 2011, but for some reason it's present in 6.5. He does not have any animations, and when eliminating him, he just kinda sits there for a couple of seconds before disappearing. We also have a trash man husky that throws a trash can at the player that splits into 3 skulls on contact. The Taker has animations for his soul-sucking actions, which is present in Online Test 6, and it looks pretty cool. However, this animation was later removed sometime between Online Test 7 and 8. The nature element variations of every enemy are purple in this build as well. 2 new features that were never added to Save the World are present in this build. One of them is a first-person mode, which honestly would have been really interesting to see in the final game, and the other one is a scrapped action RPG mode. This mode seems to have been more of an early experiment as it only features a top-down camera and you aren't actually able to move around, suggesting that it was just an idea that they were testing that never developed into anything further. It's time for weapons. There are some weapons that are test weapons which I'll go over really quickly. Test Charge Rocket, made with the purpose of testing out charge-based weapons. It fires a weapon that when charged, does more damage and travels faster. There are no other explosive weapons like this in the final release, and this might have been the inspiration behind the charged shotgun in Battle Royale. Test God Gun, an extremely overpowered developer weapon that does high amounts of damage. It reloads instantly and has an extremely high amount of structured damage. Gnome Gun, a joke developer weapon. It shoots out gnomes and makes a sound like a guitar. Troll Launcher, another developer test weapon. Unlike how the gnome weapon actually shoots gnomes, this gun does not launch any trolls. Pistol Plasma, a variation of the space pistol that shoots balls of plasma instead of the beams the space pistol shoots. Beam Sapatron, does the same amount of damage as the normal Sapatron, just as a continuous beam instead. Wanna Gun, a developer test gun that isn't really a gun but acts as a creative phone where you can actually copy and paste around stuff. For some reason mine doesn't work, but here's how it's supposed to work and it's pretty neat. M80, an explosive weapon that when thrown, explodes on impact with players and does not damage structures. For some reason this was once present in the Battle Royale files until Season 4, but it belongs to Save the World. Bullseye, a sniper rifle that shoots a single shot, dealing high damage, with damage falling off over distance. This version of Bullseye is a test for an unused night vision weapon. Night vision test. Uses the Bullseye model and it's pretty self-explanatory. Used to test night vision. It highlights husk and such when used at nighttime. The effect is turned off when used in daytime. Permanite was a scrap resource that was part of the other 3 resources that would have been used to upgrade your builds in early versions of the game. The build could have been upgraded 100 times with Permanite and would turn gray as you continued to upgrade it. This was later dropped and instead you had to use the material you used to build to upgrade it. And that's all for 6.5. Online Test 7 added a bunch of new things and renamed Close the Gate to fight the storm. The home base tab was fully reworked and removed. Skill tree was introduced, but this time the tree allowed you to unlock new hero gadgets, hero stats, and more. Survivors are present and when you talk to them they have a speech bubble at the top of their heads. For Online Test 8, there isn't anything too major or memorable, but there are still a few things worth highlighting, especially from Online Test 8.2. We have a clip showing the Storm Shield deployment which looks different from the final game. Instead of instantly appearing, it actually gets built piece by piece. In another clip, we can see the old supply drop animation, which was also present in 6.5 along with item pickups that are fairly similar to the final version. There's also a clip of the here's where you can build cutscene, which honestly looks better than the final release, but in this version, the structures are built smoothly using wood, whereas in the final game, they just appear instantly and they are made out of brick. Another small difference is the starter pickaxe, which uses the old bat model instead of the old trusty pickaxe. During the setup in this version, you're rewarded with a mini llama token, which can be used to claim a free loot llama in the store. After that, you earn more through quests and daily rewards. Larger upgrade llamas can be obtained by purchasing them or by earning V-Bucks through gameplay. At one point, the game even tells you to buy llamas as part of a quest, and once that's completed, the setup continues with the skill tree. Online Test 9 added new things and changed minor things like UI design and names of missions. And since it was Halloween during this test, the lobby looks different and there was a new transform tab that was added for Halloween. This tab allowed you to trade in your heroes and survivors for a pumpkin transform key that was used to create the Jackal launcher. For Online Test 10, we actually have access to the full build, and the story behind it is pretty interesting. Someone was selling a PS4 dev kit that had the Online Test 10 installed on it, disguised as an application called Mailed App. To get access to it, the community raised $3,100 and purchased the dev kit along with the build. The build was hidden as Mail App to prevent people from scraping the PlayStation CDN and discovering it. This version is currently the earliest publicly known console build of Fortnite, although there still may be earlier internal builds that we haven't seen before. It's also worth noting that this build isn't on the same Fortnite branch as Online Test 11 and later, since Online Test 11 is technically considered version 1.0. This test is also the last build to feature the original Online Test HUD and UI style, both in the menus and during gameplay. It's also the final build to include PvP, and it introduces 2 new additional modes besides Weather the Storm, which I will get into right now. The first one is called Domination, which is pretty straightforward. Players capture stationary objectives around the map, earning points over time. The more objectives you held, the faster you scored. The first team to reach the score limit won the match. Voice lines for this mode exist in the Online Test 6 files, while the full mode in some of the maps were later found in Online Test 10. And the other mode is Capture the Flag. If you watched the first Fortnite Cut content video, you probably heard about this one since it was in Battle Royale, but Save the World originally had its own version too. Each team had a flag and the goal was to steal the enemy's flag and return it to your base to score. The first team to reach the point limit won. The map featured a large empty gap at the middle, forcing players at the start of the match to build their way across the other side. Here's some of the voice lines Raid had for the mode.
Flag returned. Your flag's been returned. Flag taken. Your flag has been taken. Your control point has been captured. Our control point's been captured. The enemy's taking our control point. The enemy's muscling in on our control point. Control point captured. All right. Control point taken. Good job, team. You are capturing the control point. Capturing control point. Keep it up. Control point contested. Control point is contested. Who will win? Your control point has been neutralized. Oh no. Our control point has been neutralized. Enemy killed. Enemy taken out. Enemy blown away. Enemy down. Enemy taken down. Ooh, you got taken out. Ooh, that must have hurt. Ooh, not good. Nothing a respawn won't fix. Ow, that's got a sting. Friendly down. Oh no, ally down. Ooh, teammate taken out. Oh, friendly killed. Flag returned.
Another mission in this test that doesn't have much information but was being worked on was called Stack the Bones. The idea of this mission was going around collecting bones to make a stack of bones. The concept sounds very similar to Eliminate and Collect, which we could probably assume that this was the original version of that mission, but the map is unfinished and it just has stacks of bones around the map. Maple Tree Valley is a scrap zone and the description for the zone reads, defend against challenging enemies from a single direction. The mission generation for this zone uses the Retrieve the Data objective, suggesting that it may have originally been designed as a Retrieve the Data mission. The zone would later appear again in the Simpsons update where it was re-added alongside several other pieces of early Save the World Alpha content. And lastly, Online Test 11, which we also have builds for, though only the Xbox One and PS4 versions. The files for the Windows version does exist, but they come from a very hard to find physical PC release that appears to have been only sold in certain countries, particularly Germany. Unfortunately, the files for the PC version are heavily compressed and can't be decompressed. Because of this, the PC build technically exists, but it's inaccessible due to the massive amount of data required to brute force it. As I mentioned before, this build is notable because it's technically considered version 1.1, while the official early access release in July is known as version 1.2. There are no noticeable differences between this build and the early access official build release from July 24, 2017. And that's everything that I found from each online test. I honestly did not expect there to be so much stuff, but if I missed something, let me know in the comments below. In 2024, Epic Games accidentally made one of their GitHub repositories public for a few minutes. Someone quickly noticed and archived a copy on the Internet Archive before it was taken down. Inside the repository was a large amount of internal documentation intended for Epic employees, including guides on how to animate assets using Autodesk Maya. This leak is dubbed as the Artsy Leak. While digging through the files of this leak, people also discover a number of assets from the 2013-2014 Fortnite builds. There are several assets from 2013 to 2014 that come from Fortnite. These included pre-alpha models of characters like Ramirez, Jess, and a version of Jonesy from the online test, and a large collection of weapons, melee items, and props. The leak also contained several UI elements, such as the icons for weapons and melee items, along with something called Choose a Husk, which I have no clue what it was meant for. Icons related to outfit customization, including heroes and different head options, are present. It seems likely that players were able to choose a hero and then customize their appearance. And for the final part of this video, we'll be looking at post-release content. Starting with the Husk, we have an early version of the armor Husk, and its appearance is silver and has 3 shields above its head, each shield giving a 30% damage reduction. It's extremely resistant to ranged attacks, but the armor can be broken through if attacked with a melee weapon. This Husk was most likely reworked into the Chrome Husk. Digger Husk digs underneath builds to get to the objective faster. The animation for it coming out of the ground is the same animation as Husk spawning out of the ground from the Mac 2015 presentation. This was possibly planned to release around 2019, as it is only referenced in the Exploding Death Bomb modifier, which was released in Update 10.0. Tunneler would dig underground to the objective and create a tunnel. Then the Tunneler would carry Husk to those tunnels and spawn them right next to the objective. Any monster could also walk into the tunnel and travel through it. This was also planned to release in 2019, as they are only referenced in 1 yard quest where you have to kill missed monsters. And lastly, Demeter, an unused boss enemy for the Cut Demeter event. From within the developer file passed for update 9.41, what can be determined was that Demeter would be an event that would have multiple exclusive zones with all new buildings, a possible new hero, its own missions involving rifts, rescuing people, and more. There are only 2 known scrap heroes, Modern Military Sarah and Lyra. Lyra was planned to be an Outlander, and some of her dialogue lines were also found. For weapons, there's the Boomstick, a gun that fires grenades. Only the legendary version called the Bear actually works and is based on an existing weapon in the game, while the Boomstick itself doesn't seem to be based on any pre-existing weapons. Next is Shot God, which is another developer weapon similar to the God Gun. Then there's a flare gun that actually fires rockets, dealing around 7 damage and uses unused particle effects. It also has a placeholder icon and model, and it's likely that this weapon eventually evolved into the Freedom's Herald. And the last weapon is the Recon Scanner. This weapon is based on the item introduced in Fortnite Battle Royale during Chapter 2 Season 7, and it was intended to release alongside weapons like the Third Rail, Shooting Star, Pulse Pounder, and Plasmatic Discharger. However, it likely would have worked differently in Save the World. The Battle Royale version fires a device that scans and marks enemies in your HUD, but since that mechanic isn't as useful in Save the World, it probably would have been reworked in some way, though we may never know how it would have worked. There are 3 unused rarities in Fortnite: Transcendent, Impossible, and Handmade. Transcendent was used for developer items and is represented by a light red color. In the 15.0 update, it was reworked into the exotic rarity, which uses a light blue color and is now seen on several Fortnite Battle Royale weapons. Despite the change, it's still internally referred to as Transcendent. Impossible is another developer test rarity, shown with a light green color, not to be confused with Uncommon. It's used on items like the God Gun, the Troll Launcher, and the Empty Backpack Cosmetic. Handmade was used for certain early items and schematics in Save the World, and is represented by a gray color, which is separate from Common. The schematics that were originally used for this rarity are the default ones given to players when they first start Save the World. The hoverboard was supposed to have some sort of trick ability, but was also scrapped entirely. Gadgets are abilities that can be unlocked through the Upgrades tab and used during missions, offering effects like healing, damage, or resource generation. There are also a few that never made it into the final version of the game. We have 2 Outlander gadgets that were created by Drew Hill Studio. In the image, there are 2 devices. The one on the right may look familiar to creative players, as it was later repurposed into the Advanced Storm controller. The original vision for it was that it would expand and damage husks within a certain radius. The device on the left is called the Matter Collector. According to Drew Hill, it was designed to gather resources directly from structures, allowing Outlanders to harvest materials more efficiently. There's also a grappling hook gadget, which functions similarly to the early version of the grappler from Battle Royale, but uses a completely unique model. And lastly, there's the Seeker, a scrap gadget that will fire a missile capable of locking onto enemies. Since many of its original files are missing, any footage that shows this gadget is typically a mock-up using modified items to replicate how the ability would have worked. Epic Games originally planned to introduce the first water-based trap called the Goo Trap, but it never made it into the game, and as of now, only the concept art of this trap exists. And that wraps up this video. I did my best to cover as much Save the World content as possible, and huge thanks to the 4Chive Discord for helping me piece together a timeline for a lot of what you have seen. I'll leave a link to their server in the description if you want to help them track down older builds or share any information about early Fortnite. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more content like this, and check out the series playlist below if you want to dive into Fortnite Battle Royale's cut content as well. And let me know in the comments what your favorite part of this video was. And if you want, use code STORM in the item shop, as it really helps support the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.